Good morning. My name is Kurt Wilson. I'm the scripture reader for the 11 o'clock service today. The scripture I'll be reading is from the New International Version. And in that version, we turn to Judges, the 13th chapter. We will begin with verse 3 and read 3, 4, and 5. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." This is the word of the Lord.
Would you bow with me for prayer, please? Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So, when I first found out, for the first time, that I was going to be a father, I had, let's just say, an emotional conflict. Part of me was ecstatic that I was going to be a father. The other half of me was terrified that I was going to be a father. I thought of all the great things, and we didn't even know, this is Parker, we didn't know if he was a boy or girl then. And I've told you about the sheer terror and the pleading with God when my daughter was born a few years later. But my first time we were planning it, we were trying for one. We were kind of tired of my mother saying things that are real subtle, like, "Am I going to die before I'm a grandparent?" Well, okay, yeah, you guys know that, right? Okay. So we were trying, but then when I found out that all of a sudden the clock was ticking, I realized a couple of things. One, that my house was a minefield of danger for a child. I had to cover all the electrical outlets. I had to cover every corner in bubble wrap or something. I saw every staircase in my house, and we lived on a one-story house, but we had steps. Every one of those is just a death trap. And my dogs, who I love, just were all of a sudden, walking liabilities. And that was just the easy part. The more complex part was, oh my goodness, I'm 30 years old. I have 9 months until I'm expected to raise a human being, and I'm still a kid. I don't know what it's like to be an adult. I have never had to adult really anything. I'm just pretending to be an adult right now. And I'm kind of still there, just so you guys know. But we all are. Right. I was hoping maybe 40. No. Okay, we'll see about 50 and 60 and 70. But we were also excited about it. Excited about being a father. And despite all the fears that we had, we were just joyous and excited, and my mother and my mother-in-law went crazy with excitement. My mom started planning things. Over the next few months, we did a whole bunch of stuff with the nursery and the house, and a lot of outlet covers and things like that, and bought some dog gates and some children's gates and things like that. We were a little bit of planners. We had friends, though, that were really big. I mean, they had been trying for a while, and they were planners, and they had the nursery already set up by the time that they found out that the clock was ticking. They were crazy excited, and I can't even describe, they had a celebration where they kind of showed off their preparation for it. Oh, look at this, and look at this, and look at this. And we were, of course, a little bit ahead of them in the clock, but at the same time, way behind them in the preparation phase. And so their amount of joy is overwhelming to me. But even that amount of joy of our friends who lived in Tulsa, who still live in Tulsa, is nothing compared to what I think we see here in our scripture today. You see, if someone, particularly a woman, was barren, a lot of her value in that society was lessened. A lot of the value she came was from her ability to have children in that culture. And so the idea that Manoah's wife, was barren and was going to have a child was great news. It was ecstatic news. Okay, first of all, your value all of a sudden is increased because now you're going to have a child. Even better, it's going to be a boy. And then the news just keeps getting better. He's going to be a Nazarite. And we'll talk about what the Nazarite vow is in just a little bit and how it looks. And then moreover, like the kicker at the end of that whole prophecy that we read was that, and he will take the lead against the Philistines. And we'll talk about who the Philistines were to the people of the Israelites in a second. Now, this was such good news to Manoah's wife, Samson's mom. We don't even know her name. That when she told Manoah, Samson's father, an angel came to visit me and he gave me all this great news, he did not believe her. He said, no, go back to that angel and tell him to come visit me. And she did. And the angel did too. So then, even though Manoah's wife gets the message first, Manoah gets the message, the exact same message about their son, Samson. And the biggest part of that is that he will be a Nazarite and that he will take the lead against the Philistines. Now let's talk about the Nazarite vows, just a few moments. The name of this sermon series is Fulfilled because of the gifts that the Lord gives us that pour out in the others. The Nazarite vow was threefold. One, that you would never ever allow any hair on your head to be cut or shaved. You guys know that. We're talking about Samson. You know Samson had long hair. Also, he could never drink anything that was fermented. That means no wine, no stronger drinks, no vinegar. In fact, he couldn't even be around grapes or grape seeds and couldn't eat them. And then the last is he could do nothing that could make him ceremonially unclean. Most of that is having to do with dead bodies. If you are ceremonially clean, you cannot be around any bodies. In fact, there was provisions in the Nazarite law laid down by God to Moses in Numbers that if you were in a room and you had taken the Nazarite vow and someone just passed away while you were in the room with them, there was ritual cleansing that you had to do to kind of reinvest into the Nazarite vow. It was a serious vow. And as we see in our scripture, Samson's mom lived into that vow before he was born, so that he was born into that life. Now, there's two sections for the Nazarite vow. There is the time where it's a temporary vow. And we know other biblical figures who we believe took a temporary Nazarite vow. Samuel, most likely John the Baptist. Also, we know that Paul took a temporary Nazarite vow. The only one that we know took the lifetime Nazarite vow. We think maybe others did, but we know Samson took the lifetime Nazarite vow. Now, when pastors speak about Samson, and it's not very often, my guess is that you guys probably have rarely heard a sermon on Samson because pastors don't know what to do with his story. It's an uncomfortable, it's a weird story. It is a tragedy to me. And so as we go forward, know that the tragedy that we're going to talk about will lead to some weird endings for this sermon, so just prep for it. Just let you know, fair warning about that. But I want to think, before we jump into all the things that we know that Samson did that missed the mark, we consider what a Nazarite vow has to do with a child as he is growing up. Moreover, all the folks in the Bible besides Samson who took a Nazarite vow had the choice to take the Nazarite vow. Samson didn't have it. And he grew up underneath this weight of this vow. I mean, let's just talk about them in order. The first one is you could never cut your hair. Now, I know this might be really hard to believe, but when I was in grade school, I had hair. And I occasionally got a bad haircut. A rat tail in second grade comes to mind. And I still remember the times when you showed up to school, whether the haircut was bad or just you thought it was bad, and you couldn't do anything. You just had to walk in, and everybody was looking at you. Or at least you thought that. And you felt so ostracized and so separated. And that's just the haircut part. Also, to never be able to drink anything, pretty much besides milk or water. Because in this time frame, the only way to preserve beverages is through fermentation. It's the only way to keep them so that they don't grow bacteria and things. So whenever Samson's friends went off to enjoy a celebration or something, he could not join in. He was separated from the very beginning. And the Nazarite vow is one of consecration and separation. So imagine growing up, being separated from all your friends, not just because you have bad hair, but also because whenever they're off having a celebration, you can't really jump in all the way. And then there's the last, which to me is the worst one. You can never be around a body that has passed or someone who's passed. And to me, that is the first step in the mourning process, is to see the body and to know that the spirit has left, and for you to be able to say goodbye to what remains. But think of Samson as never being able to participate or go in and start that process. And all of a sudden, we see Samson as, okay, he was a strong guy with really bad hair, and now we see Samson as someone who grew up with something that was really tough. And that's the vow. There's also the prophecy that's been given for his life, that he would take the lead against these enemies, the Philistines. So let's talk about the Philistines for just a moment. The Philistines were people who were in the Holy Land a little bit before the Israelites went into the Holy Land. There's differential thoughts about where they're from, but what is believed is that they were people from the sea and that they were colonizing the Holy Land. They worshipped the god Dagon, which is a reason that we think they're from the sea. He is a head of a man and the body of a fish. It's also believed that they had metallurgy technology that was superior to the Israelites, which means that they worked with bronze better, and that their weapons and their armor was superior to that of the Israelites, and that gave them a significant advantage in the wars that would follow. And the Israelites would be at war with the Philistines from the time of the judges all the way up through Saul, even to the time of David. The Philistines were this great enemy. But Samson, from before he was born, it was prophesied that he would take the lead in this great fight. Now, a lot of movies have these prophesized heroes, but we think that it happens in real life. At what age do you start taking the lead? What, 3 years old? 4, 5, 10, 13? At what age do people stop putting expectations or start putting expectations for you to do crazy and amazing things? The idea of not only the vow, but also the prophecy that's on Samson's life is weight and heavy. And so as we look at Samson and all the ways that he doesn't hit the mark in his life, I don't want to forget about those things. That's why I've mentioned them. Now, my guess is that you know part of Samson's story. That you know Samson and Delilah, you know he had long hair, you might know the way in which his life ended. But I thought we would just take a couple minutes and let me review the whole thing. And it gets confusing. Okay? So bear with me as we talk about this. So when Samson was a young man, from after the scriptures that we had, it skips forward to when he is a young man and he's walking to a town called Tinman. Tinman is a town controlled by the Philistines. And on the way to Tinman, he gets attacked by a lion. He wrestles the lion, he beats the lion, and then it says he rips the lion apart and leaves the carcass, and then continues on into Tidman. Now, Tidman was controlled by the Philistines, which is, again, just not good to be in a town that is controlled by your great enemy. But he gets there, and he sees a lady who he thinks is cute. So then he goes back to his parents and says, hey, I found a lady amongst the Philistines, and I want you to get her for me as my wife. Now, for the Israelites, there was a list of nations that they could not intermarry with. The Philistines were not on that list. So this was not necessarily against the law of the Israelites, but at the same time, if you're at war with somebody, it's just not good practice when you're going to be the leader against this fight to marry into that family. So as his parents agree reluctantly, and as he's going back and forth to Tidman, visiting his soon-to-be wife, one day on the way back, he's hungry, and he looks over at his lion carcass, his victory, and bees have moved in, and he's hungry. So he goes over and grabs honey out of the lion carcass and begins to eat it. And there's two things about that. One, you know how much I love honey, but that's really gross. Okay, I'm just, ugh. I love honey, but no, there's a dead body there. But the more important is, yeah, there's a dead body there. He's not allowed to touch dead bodies. So already, right from the very beginning, we see him breaking the first of his Nazarite vows. Back and forth he goes to Tidman, and pretty soon his wedding is approaching, and they throw him a bachelor party. At the bachelor party, it takes place in Tidman. And there are these friends listed in the scripture, and those friends are all Philistines. They're all friends and family members of his bride. And at those parties, culturally, they are frivolous, exuberant, libacious, if you will. There's alcohol present. Let's just say that. And it doesn't necessarily say in the scripture that he had some, but every time I read it, I get the feeling that he had a couple. The reason I believe that is because he decides to make a wager with these friends for 30 pieces of clothing. And as you guys know, in that culture, clothing is super expensive. And he says, I have a riddle, and if you can solve the riddle, then I'll give you 30 pieces of clothing. If you can't, you have to give me 30 pieces of clothing. And he makes up a riddle about the lion, which there's no way they would know about. And so, they're frustrated because they made the wager and they can't win it, except for they figure out a way. They go to Samson's would-be wife and says, hey, get Samson to tell you the secret to his riddle, and then you tell us. And she does. Now, this is foreshadowing. So she goes to Samson, hey, if you really love me, you'll tell me your riddle, if you really care. He gets tired of her persistence. He tells her, she tells them, and then they win the bet with Samson. Samson's mad, he's lost face, and he has a debt to pay. So he goes and kills 30 Philistines, takes their clothes off, and presents that as the payment for his debt. Again, is he allowed to touch dead bodies? No. Thank you. In the back. He's not allowed to do that. And so he leaves again, and his father-in-law thinks that now he must be mad with his would-be wife, so he gives his daughter to one of the friends at the bachelor party. Are you feeling the soap opera yet? It's happening. So Samson comes back to Tidman visiting his soon-to-be wife and realizes that she's married to somebody else. He is upset. So his reaction, very normal, typical reaction, no, it's not. He decides to get 300 foxes together, tie torches to their tails, and light the torches on fire and release them into the fields of the Philistines at harvest time when everything is dry. The Philistines are upset by this. They then take out their revenge on his would-be father-in-law and his almost wife, and then kill them. Samson goes and hides in a cave. Other Israelites, friends, real friends of Samson, or people who should be his friend, then go to him and say, we're kind of tired of this. We're going to hand you over to the Philistines. He says, okay, just don't kill me. Tie me up, though. You tie him up, hand him over to the Philistines. He gets into the Philistine camp, breaks his ropes, picks up a donkey jaw, and kills 1,000 Philistines. And that is the end of the story of young Samson. Because then there's one verse right there in the middle that says, and Samson led against the Philistines for 20 years. And then we catch up with older Samson. He's once again going to a town controlled by the Philistines, and I'm going to put this. He's visiting a lady of ill reputation, and he's done with that transaction, and then walks outside and sees Delilah. Now, not the singer, not the radio talk show host. She's named after this Delilah. Delilah is a Philistine, and he decides that he's fallen instantly in love with her. She's the only one that was ever for him, apparently, because the Philistines now see an opportunity. They go to Delilah and say, hey, if you can get Samson to tell you the secret to his strength, we'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And she agrees. So then she goes, does this seem familiar to you? To Samson, and says, hey, if you love me, you'll tell me the secret of your strength. And he begins to lie to her. Says, oh, if I'm tied up with 30 wet bowstrings, I become as weak as the next guy. So she ties him up, has Philistines waiting in the next room, and then tests his word and says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he breaks out of it, ready to go, ready to fight. She's mad. So he does the exact same thing now with fresh ropes. Again, Philistines in the next room, breaks out of it. She's mad. She goes to him, oh, you're making fun of me. You never cared about me because this blah, 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 blah. He gets more frustrated. So he then lies to her again and says, well, if you take my hair and you weave it in a certain way, then I'll become as weak as the next guy. And she does. And you would think that he would understand what's happening, but he still doesn't. Because again, the whole situation repeats and recycles one more time. He breaks the ropes when she says the Philistines are upon you. And so then she goes back to him for the last time and says, you've never loved me. If you ever loved me, you would tell your secret. You're embarrassing me because you're not telling me the truth about your strength. And he gives in. Tells her the truth, that the secret is his hair. If she cuts it, or he cuts it, then he will lose all his strength. He falls asleep. She cuts his hair, ties him up. Once more, the Philistines are upon you. He tries to break the ropes and can't. Now notice this. He doesn't lose his strength until he's broken all 3 of the Nazarite vows. That's when he loses it. Philistines come in, capture him, gouge out his eyes, take him off to prison, and he is milling grain for them. And at some point in the future, the Philistines decide that they are going to gloat over him in their temple, the temple of Dagon, at one of the religious festivals. So they say, bring out Samson to entertain us, our defeated foe. They bring out Samson. It doesn't feel like the first time this has happened, but this is the time where Samson maybe has an idea. The scriptures say that his hair began to grow back, but even then I read that I don't connect the dots, that his hair is the secret to his strength, because I believe his prayer is. But as he's saying, he talks to the attendant and says, hey, I'm really tired, lean me up against the pillars. And so he does. And it says he has one hand on each of the main support pillars for the temple. And he prays to God, Lord, one more time, give me my strength so that I can take revenge on the Philistines. And the Lord does. He pushes the pillars. The whole place caves in on top of the head of the Philistines. And it says that he killed more Philistines with his death than he did in his life. That is the tragedy of Samson. And why would I say that? Why would I tell you guys that? Why would I detail the story? It's because I believe this. And I want to be very, very careful as I go forward. So please hear my words and hear my intent more than my words, is this: that Samson's life is a reflection of our own. We are each given gifts, and we are each either put on us or we put on ourselves expectations for who we are. Maybe not as crazy and as big as Samson's. We don't have super strength, but we have abilities. And maybe not, we have the expectation that we're going to lead in a fight against a great enemy. But at the same time, either people have put expectations on us or we have put expectations on ourselves. My thought is this: that even though Samson betrayed the gifts that he was given, and even though that he forsook all of the Nazarite vows that he was under, but the prophecy about his life, that he would lead in the fight against the Philistines, was 100% fulfilled. So in our life, we make mistakes. In the scripture that we read, excuse not scripture, but the liturgy we read before the Lord's Supper, it says that we have failed to be an obedient church, and I agree with that. Because I know I have failed to be an obedient pastor. I have failed to be an obedient person. I have failed to be an obedient father. But at the same time, I know that even the mistakes I make, the Lord fulfills His vows and the promises that He made in my life. Now here's the one caveat I have to that. Even though I totally believe that the Lord will always lead us into good things and that His plan and pleasing and perfect will is real, just like in Romans, I believe that Samson's life was full of pain for himself and those around him. And the reason I think that is because he made decisions based on his own ego and his desire for revenge. And so today, as we're wrapping up our time together, two things, and I want to be very, very careful with this. One, I believe the Lord works all things for good. But at the same time, sometimes we experience pain by our own making. We do when the reason we make the decisions is for negative reasons. But even those negative reasons can, and many times are, used by the Lord to fulfill His will. And I feel like I'm walking a tightrope as I'm telling you guys this. But I believe both sides of that. So today, as you go, remember that the Lord will use you no matter what decisions you make for good and for His pleasing and perfect will. But at the same time, the motivation for those things, we can either lead you into pain or lead you into joy. And my prayer for you